Well, I think what I value most about working with any students is those moments where you leave thinking about something in a completely different way, when your perspective shifts, when real learning occurs, and real learning that is co-constructed. I'm a very constructivist type of educator, and so when I ask questions, most of the time they're real questions. I don't ask a lot of fishing questions where there's a clear right answer, but I like to ask real questions that involve depth of thought and sometimes even community responses to create and construct new knowledge. And so my favorite thing about working with students, undergraduates and graduates, is the construction of new knowledge and engaging in those opportunities where new learning and new growth occur. I think particularly in this department and the courses that I'm teaching now, where people are often planning to go into the helping professions, maybe as counselors, maybe as therapists. When I was in my doctoral program, one of the things I learned are that there are multiple databases of knowledge. So one is all of these sort of academic and skills-based knowledge that you get from a program that's maybe poured into you. But you also have a personal database that you really have to rely on, because in counseling, the biggest tool you have is the self. You are the one that is making choices about which micro skill or what to pick up on, or I had a gut instinct about that, I'm going to go back. And so how do you make sense of that professional database, and how do you use it to the best advantage? And so even if students don't come in with a college degree, which most undergraduates don't, they have a personal database of knowledge and experiences that can be incredibly useful. I am driven in my research and my teaching really to discover things that promote the social good in the largest sort of abstract sense. One of the areas that I am really focused in on is diversity science, and how do we use science to promote and foster diversity, to advance a cohesive multicultural society, to facilitate the development of groups that have perhaps been historically disadvantaged or perhaps underrepresented in higher education. How do we help people perform or grow or develop more optimally? And so I am driven to discover those things and how you create spaces that foster that kind of development. And one cornerstone of my research right now is the African American Student Network, which is a space that is designed to support African American students in making meaning of their experiences and finding empowerment and resilience and connectedness and validation in educational settings. I had my African American Student Networking group today, and the discussion was actually on marriage and family. And students were sharing a statistic about Black women being very likely to end up single or unmarried, and how they felt about that statistic and how they felt about marriage and what was the purpose of marriage. And so we spent the whole group really trying to dissect and understand these complex issues around love and marriage and people's perceptions and fears and biases and hopes and dreams. And so when you create spaces like that, where AFAM has been found to be a validating, safe space of connectedness, empowerment, intellectual stimulation, a home base on campus, then people learn how to be in healthy and relational spaces. And even how to disagree. As one student who's very pro-marriage, pro-love, put her perspective out there and someone raised their hand and she said, fine, go ahead, challenge me. You know, but the idea that you can be in space and you can be in community and have different opinions and different experiences and yet still come together to try to understand complex phenomena of living, you know, these everyday problems of living. I think that when people have those spaces to practice, then it can enhance their relationships in other areas, including their family relationships. So even if the topic isn't necessarily marriage and family as it was today, the notion of being in a space that feels like a family. Sometimes with African Americans, they talk about fictive kin, or you know, you just sort of adopt and have these extended families. And that African American Student Network, which is also called AFAM, some people have said, you know, AFAM is like a family. You know, it's been described as a home base on campus. And so when people are given the opportunity to have these spaces where I'm going to sound very Rogerian now, but where there's empathy, where there's authenticity, where there's positive regard, these are the things that I do believe help to unlock our natural tendencies toward growth. And that the more that you're in healthy relational spaces that support and validate you to grow, the better you're able to also create those kinds of spaces in your own lives. I will say that I am a mission-driven person, and my research trajectory has always been driven by questions that I find really important. And the questions that I find important come from, I think, my own experience and my own values around social justice and being a first-generation, low-income, trio college student. And so I developed a line of research on career development because that was part of my job when I got hired, was to teach a career development course. But I wanted to make sure that the course I taught was one that was sensitive to students from diverse backgrounds. That was a multicultural career development course. And so that was the course I developed. And then as somebody interested in diversity science and as a scientist practitioner, I wanted to know, well, does my course operate the way I want it to operate and the way I think it should operate? I want to inspire and empower students to find their career paths. Inspiration is hard to measure. Empowerment gets a little easier, and then we can think about constructs like self-efficacy. You know, how well are you able to, how well do you feel like you can do the things that you want to do? Versus negative thinking about career. How much do you feel like you're just not going to be able to do the things you want to do because of confusion or anxiety or conflict? Like, these become measurable things. So do the students who take the course have more self-efficacy at the end than they did at the beginning? Do they have fewer negative or dysfunctional career thoughts at the end than they do at the beginning? Like, these are ways that I can sort of operationalize this notion of empowerment. And so I think that if you have a question, don't be afraid to ask it. And don't be afraid to find out a way to test it and to measure it, because your own experience can really drive and shape your career in a way that helps you feel like you're on mission and you're doing the things that you were meant to do.